So right now, as Israeli forces continue their assault on Gaza, President Biden today said that Hamas's refusal to release women is why the truce fell apart in the first place. In a campaign event, President said that, quote, Hamas's refusal to release the remaining young women is what broke this deal and ended the pause in the fighting. Biden added that he is not going to stop until we bring every one of them home. I want to bring in now our IDF spokesperson, Major Doron Spielman. Thank you so much for joining us, Doron. We really appreciate your time, Major. And let me ask you, first of all, what is your reaction to that statement from the president? Is that, in fact, why the ceasefire initially fell apart?
I can tell you it's certainly one of the elements. I mean, the reason that we paused our fighting in the first place after Hamas carried out this horrific attack against Israel, and we were closing in on them in a very opportune time to hopefully eliminate those major Hamas terrorists, the reason we pulled back is because of what were 250 hostages in Gaza. There are still 138 remaining, including women and, I have to say, children, you know, 2-year-old baby, a 4-year-old baby. I mean, it's just unimaginable for us. And certainly in Israel, it's a small country where we feel that these are our own children and our own daughters. We are absolutely insistent that we have to destroy Hamas to the end and bring our people back home. So, yes, we definitely relate to the president's words.
And we know, at least at this point, there are at least 17 women and children still being held hostage. Also, Major, the UN and human rights groups are just now starting to condemn these allegations of gender-based violence, rape, and sexual mutilation of Israeli women and girls by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. And today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying to these groups, where the hell are you? So how has the lack of prior condemnation painted public perception of this war amid Hamas's denial?
I think it's actually a phenomenal question. And to really understand that, we have to go back to what we're looking at unfold here. Hamas had a plan pre-October 7th. They literally asked, how can we get away with murder? How are we going to be able to go into Israel, murder, rape, and get away with this? And the only answers were, we're going to take Israeli hostages back to Gaza because Israel won't want to kill their own people, which of course we don't. And we're going to hide behind Gazan civilians and use them as human shields to divert attention away from Hamas's terror activities and towards Israel. What we're seeing play out, and what the world is very late in waking up to, is exactly this process taking place. Because Hamas is putting civilians in the line of fire, and because there have been civilian deaths, many of these important elements have been really ignored. Why are we in Gaza in the first place? What happened to our women and children? How has the Red Cross not been demanded to go into Gaza? This kind of double standard was really what Hamas were counting on, and we're grateful that the world is finally waking up and is going to call them to task, not only for us, but also for the Gazan people that they are really putting in the line of fire.
And you've also said that IDF troops have now essentially surrounded Khan Yunis there in the southern part of Gaza. So tell me about the importance of that location, and what will this phase of the war look like?
Khan Yunis is really the hub of terror. If we think of any organization, like ISIS and Mosul, this is the Mosul of the Gaza Strip. When the attack was launched on October 7th, this was the main area it was launched from. A lot of the top command and leadership is based in Khan Yunis, and unfortunately, they are well embedded deep within the civilian population. What we're looking at is hundreds of tunnels popping up underneath mosques, schools, and as our forces are closing in Khan Yunis to target, it's face-to-face alleyway fighting. We try to call in aerial support, we try to call in artillery support, but because of the civilians, we're trying to be as targeted as we can to the terrorists. Very difficult fighting, but this is the main place that these Hamas terrorists are holding up, and this is where we really have to bring an end to their terror infrastructure and will to fight Israel.
And you've also heard that today Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel will have to retain open-ended security control over Gaza after the war, and went on to say that no international force can be responsible for this. So what does that mean from a military standpoint?
it's hard words for us, and I'll tell you why. Because we're a very small nation, and these are our boys and girls that are in the Army. They're young, they're 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, and we don't want them out, monitoring and having to do this. The reason why this is a reality, and it's a very tough price to pay. I can tell you as a father, it's a tough price to pay for me to serve and for children to serve, is because we really feel like we absolutely have to allow our people to live a life of peace. And it's not going to wash with Hamas. They have to be destroyed. And we cannot have anyone in the Gaza Strip unless we know that from a security perspective, they have been completely disarmed. And therefore, I believe that's probably the background to what the Prime Minister is talking about. Long term, I can tell you that the Israeli people want hope for the people of Gaza. We want them to build the Singapore out of Gaza, turn away from Hamas, and really look towards the future. And hopefully, that's our hope, provide security for us, and hopefully hope for them as well.
And as you talk about hope for the people there in Gaza, you've said that the IDF is taking extensive measures to avoid civilian casualties. But we're seeing this outcry of people from Gaza right now as the growing civilian death toll, it's rising. So can you tell us what specifically you are doing to try and avoid these civilian casualties?
Yes, first of all, I do want to say my heart does go out to these people. The conditions are very, very difficult. We're not blind to it. We see what's happening. Millions of people have been moved. What we're doing on our side, and I don't think any army has ever done this much of any civilian population that's not their own, is we are trying to move these people out of the way of fire. We have given them a map that details Gaza down to the most granular amount so that we don't have to move people large distances. If you're in a city block, know they're Hamas terrorists that are operating underneath you. They're a legitimate target. Please move 2 blocks, over to the east. We've dropped flyers. We're making constant phone calls. Today, we had almost 200 humanitarian aid trucks come into Gaza. We're trying so hard to keep this Gazan population out of the way, and I know it's not easy, but I think ultimately, if I ask, the world has got to put pressure on Hamas. If we want to see these people safe, we have to demand, Hamas, leave your own civilians out of the way. Have a shred of dignity and stand up and face the IDF in the open. Don't hide behind these men, women, and children. Don't kill them like you killed their own people. And so that we're doing everything we can, and we hope the world will pressure Hamas to do everything they can as well.
And also, just in terms of how some of the people inside Gaza are feeling with these leaflets, they are telling ABC News that some of these leaflets are a bit confusing. I know there's this QR code on there, but some people also say in Gaza that, they don't have power. I know that is something that you have refuted in the past in terms of people having, access to power. But how do you respond to that when some people say that despite the leaflets and despite the phone calls, they still feel like no place is safe?
I understand where they're coming from. I really do. And I don't want to put a sugarcoating on this. I think Gaza is an incredibly difficult place to be. We are doing absolutely everything we can. It's clear to us we have to destroy Hamas. I think it's clear to everyone, or mostly everyone. Hamas has to be destroyed. But we are doing everything we can, and we're open to new ideas. We're constantly coming up with new ideas. We are also calling on all these international aid agencies that are there in the field. If it's UNRWA, if it's UNICEF, if it's the Red Cross, don't just say that these people can't be moved. They've already been moved. We've already moved more than 1 million people to safety. Work with us, work with them, help us move them to safety. Let's all try to keep these people safe and destroy Hamas, which is really destroying their lives at the end of the day. This is the only way to get to a more hopeful future, but we need help. And we hope these international aid agencies will really help the situation and not curtail the situation.
Major Doron Spielman, I am so grateful for your time today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Coming up next here, Israel closing in on a key city there in southern Gaza. You just heard him talk about this as the Palestinian people say they just sort of have nowhere to run. So we will discuss this all with our panel when we come back. I want to bring our panel into our big story here. So joining us today is our ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host Mike Muse, ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy, ABC News contributor and former senior operations officer for the CIA Daryl Blocker, and ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the LA Times LZ Granderson. Thank you all for being here with us. So Mick, let's just start here with you. We just got some new information into our newsroom right now. We're learning here that the Israeli foreign minister, Mick, has revoked the UN humanitarian coordinator's residence visa, saying they did not condemn Hamas and instead condemned Israel. So what are your thoughts on that?
So, Kena, I really think it is hard to believe that the UN group that's supposed to support women has taken so long to say anything about this. And essentially what we saw today in the UN was sponsored by the United States and Israel. And the atrocities that were committed against particularly women October 7th need to be condemned roundly by any group, let alone a group that is supposed to champion the rights of women. It was truly unbelievable and should never happen again and should never have happened.
And LZ, we're seeing President Biden and international humanitarian rights groups also start to condemn these gender-based attacks against Israeli women and Israeli girls on October 7th. So what do you think the perceptions of this war are when you think about the horrific images that we're also seeing out of Gaza?
Well, I can tell you from a timeline perspective, what works against Israel is the fact that most of the references of the violence goes back to October 7th, whereas when we're talking about the Palestinian people, it's a day-to-day, hour-by-hour update. And so the victim of the narrative has somewhat shifted from a storytelling perspective. And throughout history, we know how important it is that the war narrative be controlled by those who are trying to win the actual war so that the moral high ground remains theirs. And so my concern is that the longer this war is stretched out, the more images that we see of innocent victims being killed in this war, the more Israel loses that war narrative that it needs in order to keep that moral high ground around the world.
And we've spent so much time talking about the narrative of this war and the propaganda campaign from Hamas as well. And Mike, as we turn here to you, we know that the fighting right now is moving into southern Gaza. It's really focused there. Residents are saying they don't feel that anywhere is safe, but there's also growing concerns about humanitarian aid even getting to those locations, right, Mike? It's one thing for the trucks to go through that Rafah crossing, but it's quite another for them to actually get to the people.
It is. I thought that was a fantastic interview that you did with Major Doron Spielman. So just wanted to say that first of all. But what kept coming out from him was he kept talking about the humanitarian need and what they have done in terms of pamphlets and leaflets. But you pushed back rightly so on the fact that they don't have power in order to scan the QR code in order to figure out exactly where it is they could go. They've asked them, they being the IDF, have asked them to go into South Gaza. Now they've gone to South Gaza. There's nowhere else for them to go. It's such a densely populated area as Israel prepares to its ground defense and go door to door. But at the same time, Kena, my question is, what is the exit? How does this conclude? I feel like there needs to be more diplomatic triage to understand what is the end goal, because Hamas, yes, they are soldiers that need to be eliminated, but Hamas is also now at this point become an ideology. And so how do you eliminate an ideology? That is a challenge. And so just as much as we need the Red Cross humanitarian efforts to aid in humanitarian efforts, we need more diplomatic conversations to aid in how do we bring this to a close so that the citizens that is in Gaza can live peacefully once again.
And live peacefully, but as we also heard here, Benjamin Netanyahu saying that Israel will have to retain some kind of open-ended security control over Gaza. So, Daryl, I'd love for you to touch on your thoughts on that and what the future of Gaza really could look like there. But also, Daryl, do you think that the U.S. or the Israelis have any intelligence right now on where Yahya Sinwar, the alleged mastermind of October 7th, really is at this moment?
I believe he was born in the Khan Yunis refugee camp, so that's his home ground. He's very well known to the Israelis. He was the most senior Hamas official that was released in exchange for the Gilad Shalit in 2011, and he spent 20 years in their jail. So it's not like the Israelis don't know who he is, don't know who his network is, and aren't able to track where he is based on the number of people who have since been released. So I would think that there's more than enough evidence to justify whatever it is the Israelis are suggesting. This is not a young man. He's been around, I think he's in his early 60s. So he's also known as the butcher of Khan Yunis. He is known to kill his own people. So they're afraid of him as well.
And that's terrifying. And Daryl, just if you could follow up on what you think it could look like here if the prime minister is saying no international force can be responsible for this in terms of an open-ended security control over Gaza that the IDF would be responsible for.
I think that might kind of be something along the lines of what Mike was suggesting, the diplomatic triage, that they're going to lay out their most strident and most far-reaching goal, knowing that they might have to negotiate and give a little leverage. So I think Netanyahu is just telling the world that he doesn't want the UN because he doesn't trust them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mike Muse, Daryl, and LZ, thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.